Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. If you are a cast member of the show and you're watching me react to you, keep in mind that I am reacting to an edit, and there's a pretty good likelihood that my take on you is, at the very least, overly simplistic, if not entirely wrong. So if you want an assessment, talk with someone in person because you deserve that. Everyone does. Let's watch.
I don't know.
That's tough.
Are you nervous about going back and like me talking to Molly?
Are you nervous about talking to Molly?
Yeah, it's a weird question to ask, especially early in the getaway. Are you worried about me talking to... I'm wondering if we've ever heard it phrased that way. Now, they're editing it, but I don't imagine this happened, but it could have. That he could have said, because, you know, there's no chance anything's going to happen there because I'm totally into you, which I just can't imagine him saying. I can't. The way, so here's the way it looks to me. I can't know, but it looks to me like Dave went on the show to stretch himself, and he is currently very much stretching himself, as evidenced by him crying for an hour, thinking about having to tell his sister that he might be connecting with someone. So this is a huge departure toward himself and away from the, I think, abuse and coercion that he's experienced in his life, or the way, or at least what he feels is happening. I don't know. So he did that, and he believes that this is a good thing for him, and it is a good thing for him in all likelihood. And he is way beyond his comfort level and is way outside the envelope. But it is so far short from where someone needs to be in order to actually evaluate whether or not I want to spend the rest of my life with someone. And he is not in that space that other people would be and other people are on the show, where they've done all that work prior to coming on the show, and they have some issues left over, but they still very much are in the space of like, is this person I want to be with, and how do I feel? And this feels good. And if it feels, and if we're both doing it, let's lean in and let's love and let's enjoy and let's get to know each other and all that. It doesn't look that way to me. It looks like he is emerging out, and to him, it feels like close to getting married because it's closer, but it's far from close. So along those lines, he asks, are you nervous about me talking to Molly? And then she, at least in the edits, it's hard to know if something happened there, but she's getting annoyed, and she's like, should I be? Are you nervous about, why are you bringing this up? Yeah, it is strange. So if this was in a larger conversation about Lauren being jealous, then I could see this question, or a better question would be, well, or a statement would be, let's talk about when we go back stateside and we have that party and Molly might be there, how are we going to manage that as a couple? Okay, but if he's just throwing that out there, now maybe, because this is on the heels of him talking about how he has concerns about her having dated people before. And it's interesting because in the one-on-one interview, he's saying that he questions her sincerity about, I said the funny, sincerity about wanting to get married. But in this conversation with her, it has more to do with the fact that he just knows people that she's dated. But, it wasn't, to her face, he's not saying, I'm concerned that you dated someone just before having come on the show. He said that a little bit, but he's mainly saying that in the one-on-one. What he's saying to her is, it's going to be weird for me because I know two of the people you dated before. That's a completely different statement, right? So I think there's some confusion there. And so on the heels of all that, he's like, are you nervous about me talking to Molly? I think might be a way of him in this moment anyway to try to, in his weird way, garner sympathy for what he was saying earlier. Like, well, wouldn't you feel the way I feel about you having dated people in the past that I know? And I don't seem to be getting that from you, because why would he? Because why would she relate to that? And then I think he's asking this to get her to say, well, it would concern me. because you and Molly were involved with each other before. And then he would say, see, that's what I'm going with. I think that's what he's doing.
Are you nervous about going back and like me talking to Molly?
Are you nervous about talking to Molly?
That's probably going to happen. I've just been thinking about it.
Whenever there's music that comes in hard during a conversation, it could mean a lot of different things in the edit and what they're trying to achieve. They're obviously trying to make us feel a certain way, because if you take away the music, it would feel less ominous. It might be somewhat ominous, but the musical cues, never underestimate the manipulative powers of a good musical cue, either in a reality TV show or in a movie, a fictional movie like Star Wars or something. So I'm always trying to avoid getting affected by that. And also, I'm also curious as to what the editors are doing and the storytellers. Literally, there are job positions in Kinetic called storytellers. You know, you can debate whether or not that is manipulative storytelling or telling the story. Yeah, who knows? But there's that. And another thing that the hard music cues will be doing is will be covering up how poorly the edit is, that they would take 4 or 5 different statements from a larger conversation, sometimes completely disconnected, but I don't think this is completely disconnected, but it could be. But I'm going to assume that it's at least in the same paragraph, if you will. But they are taking out other sentences or other nonverbals or something. Because the way they edited that, it's like him saying, I am looking forward to talking to Molly because I really want to be with her. So deal with it, Lauren. I'm not joking. That's the way it looked to me in the edit. Now, I will also say that history will demonstrate, to me anyway, that when there are manipulative edits, for the most part, it turns out that they are actually telling an accurate story through inaccurate editing, because they have thousands and thousands of hours of footage, and most people are just watching this show casually, and you can't have subtle things happening because they might not be noticed. So you have to really hit people with something. And so you take stuff that might be a little bit out of context, but maybe not, totally, but maybe a little bit, and put it together in a way to tell the story that actually happened, but it didn't happen in that way. Because I say all this because later on when you see interviews with cast members, it's pretty rare that they will say that the edit was a complete falsification of what their experience was. You'll see that sometimes. And of course, there are some people that will claim that when you wonder if they are just saying that because they got a bad edit, because there are some times, especially on Love Is Blind. This is less so about other reality TV shows. Other reality TV, depending on which reality TV show, they will, in a very nefarious way, edit it to make someone look good or bad in a very manipulative way. And then you will hear credible evidence from the cast or others that will say, that was complete bullshit the way that they edited me. And they've done that on this show too, like the Jackie. Anyway, so it could be that, although this is pretty ham-fistedly edited right now, it could be that this is a sign of things to come. And if that's true, then I would not be surprised. One, because I don't think that either one of these individuals are that invested, not because they're fake, but because I think they both, I would guess, were in the pods and got engaged in good faith enough, but were hoping that upon meeting each other, it would escalate in vibe and chemistry, and it's not happening, and therefore they both might be basically on the market anytime soon, whether they consciously know themselves to be on the market of dating. And so Dave, upon meeting Molly, it would be natural to say, well, it didn't work out with Lauren, so let's see what happens with Molly. Now, the proper way is to break up with Lauren and maybe date Molly away from the cameras, right? And and maybe that'll happen. I don't know. But that's one possibility, right? Another is that he, due to his worries of getting too close because of his traumas, of being abandoned, I don't know, or harmed, or not attuned to, neglected, I don't know. I have no idea. He hasn't said anything like that. That he would be looking for a way out, and Molly would be a very convenient way to get out. Who knows? But let's rewatch this, because I feel like the music cues are really interrupting things.
Are you nervous about going back and like me talking to Molly?
Are you nervous about talking to Molly?
And I don't know if there was sentences between there, but at the very least, it looks like Lauren, at some point in this conversation about this topic, was getting annoyed, which we could understand, right? So she's like, are you nervous? Like, what's going on here? And then the next edited bit is...
That's probably going to happen.
So then the next edited bit is, that's probably going to happen. And then edited in is that. Now, maybe this is all real. It's all just real time, and they just put in a musical cue. But I wouldn't be surprised if in the real conversation he said something more that was more relatable and less of a dick, of him saying something like, well, you know, it might happen. And again, getting back to something I was saying earlier, that in this line of questioning or conversation, he's trying to get her to sympathize with him in this very weird way and ill-advised way, to have her feel potential jealousy, so that he can say, see, that's what I would feel if I ran, if we were at a party and you were to talk to one of your exes in front of me, I would feel a certain way. I don't even know if he would be that explicit, but I think that's what's happening. So I would imagine that in the conversation, in his very poorly communicated way, there were more sentences along those lines, is just my guess. Because the way they're editing it, he's just like, oh, and by the way, when we go back stateside, I'm going to have sex with Molly. That's just the way that it's edited.
I've just been thinking about it.
And I could never blame you.
And then that final statement, you know, I've just been thinking about it. I have a hard time believing that that wasn't edited pretty severely. You know, I've just been thinking all the time about Molly. I would imagine that in the course of the conversation, he's doing his thing. And, you know, there's an absolute possibility that in this moment, he is thinking, oh, I screwed up. I should have been with Molly. Things aren't working out with Lauren. I made the wrong choice. That happens sometimes. And sometimes it's a healthy thing to think. When Zach and Irina, Zach is like, oh, I made a mistake, goes back to bliss, and, you know, everything's great. So, you know, that happens sometimes. And maybe he and Molly would be better together, now that I think about it. But anyway, so then, you know, I just been thinking, so I'm guessing that statement was said in a larger conversation, and she's like, why? And he's saying his more elaborate thing of, well, because of, you might feel a certain way if you were to see that happening. That's just what I'm thinking, because he's trying in his way to get her to empathize. And then it doesn't go anywhere. It seems to be aggravating her, and he doesn't know what's happening in the conversation. And so I don't know. I've just been thinking about it. You know what I mean? Now, some of you might be thinking, why are you defending this guy? I'm not defending him. I'm just trying. I'm reacting from my personhood. I don't have an agenda at all. I don't give a shit. I'm just telling you, when I watch a reality TV show that is clearly edited, I'm trying to see through the edit to the other side, and given everything that we've seen and given everything I know about humans, I'm telling you what I think happened. I don't know. And I don't care what I don't care what I'm not trying to do I'm not trying to defend anybody, I don't think. By the way, someone shared with me something on the internet of people talking about me somewhere else, which is fine. And it was positive or neutral. And it's always weird to see that, people talking about you in any context, And, I'm on the internet, so it's going to happen, and I welcome it. It's fine. And so they were having an online discussion, not a long one, about me. And again, it was positive and it was flattering. But one person chimed in and said that I was biased for, I can't remember what the statement was, but it said something like, well, Kirk, he likes pretty girls, so he's biased for them. And I was like, huh? And then I thought, is that true? It doesn't feel true initially, but let's look at it. And then someone replied to that by saying, and men. Two people were saying, or at least one person was saying, that I'm biased for attractive women and all men. And therefore, the only people I'm not biased towards are unattractive women. And then I immediately thought, well, that's interesting. And then I thought, well, how many people have I seen on this show that I would describe as unattractive? And I think people will say this about Love is Blind, that if you just describe the show, you're like, oh, that would be interesting. You have a really attractive person get engaged to a very unattractive, conventionally unattractive person. That would be interesting. That I can't think of a time that's ever happened on the show. If you don't take into account like TV people, but you take into account average human beings, I would say that everyone on Love is Blind, every season, is way above average in terms of conventional attractiveness, or at least above average, or at least average. And I don't, now I don't have a finger on the pulse of what is considered attractive for everybody, of course, but that's just, and I don't usually think along those lines. Of course, I'm going to at least unconsciously notice such things. And there are biases, and it is known that sociologically and psychologically, on average, humans do bias and prefer and have a lot more positive reactions and associations with conventionally attractive people. Not only attractiveness, but tall people, men, people that are signaling higher class, people that are dressed nicer, people that have more expensive things, people that have prestigious jobs, people that are, rich. They're seen as smarter, as better, as more interesting, all this stuff. So I'm not immune to that. And watching this show, it's possible that I am biased against lesser attractive individuals. And, I gave it some thought, and I'll continue to. And I've been thinking about it as I've been watching this show. But I feel pretty confident that in my practice as a therapist and all the work that I've done, there's a certain brand of therapist where basically we are constantly concerned about bias and are constantly evaluating and questioning ourselves, not to the point of paralysis, but to the point of fairly robust understanding. Now, we could be deluding ourselves into thinking that we see ourselves and understand ourselves, but there's a brand of therapists, and I'm definitely of that brand. I come from that ethic and that culture, and my mentors, I have one mentor, Phil Cushman, who died a couple of years ago, tragically, got hit by a car. He was also a good friend of mine, and the amount of, I get chills, the amount of introspection and wisdom and intellect that he used to investigate himself and his he went so deep that he would not only just look at the typical kind of ways of bias that we think about regarding race and gender and others, but he went so far as to look at the overall way in which we even conceptualize the very self, how we see the self. He would look at history and evidence over time that in the past, in centuries past, the self was a very different concept, and everyone had a sense of the self in a completely different way. Just an obvious example that he would talk about sometimes was that in feudal Europe during the Dark Ages, most people were peasants and were farmers or some kind of laborer that toiled away, but might have had a happy life and had no aspirations of ever rising above their station. It would be considered maybe against God to do so. And so you saw the Lord in the manor, or you had heard of him, and he was the landlord, and everything you did was in service of him, and you understood that that Lord had someone above him, a baron or a king or an emperor or something, and you were totally content because everyone was content because that was the way the system worked, and it was the very self itself was conceptualized by people in a certain way. You had a role to play, and you were not special, and or at least you weren't special in the way that we think of our, today, at least in my cultural pocket, we tend to think of ourselves as forging our own path. Now, we understand that there are social guardrails on that for some people more so than others that will never allow you to actually forge your own path, and you're being very much railroaded in a particular way, whether you know it or not, in a variety of ways, whether it has to do with oppression or capitalism or materialism or whatever. But that's how we tend to see ourselves, for better or for worse. And so my point is that I come from a brand of therapist that really does that. So when I receive, I guess, critical, constructive feedback that I am biased for attractive women and all men, and biased against unattractive women, that's something that I'm used to questioning of myself, and also receiving criticism or constructive criticism from the outside. And so when I read that, I think, well, I'll give that some thought, and I'll have to watch what I'm saying, not in a paranoid way, but just noticing, is there a bias there? There's always a bias there, is the thing. But I would guess that if I were to spend another couple years evaluating this angle regarding attractiveness and gender presentation, I would conclude, because I've already done those investigations prior to even becoming a YouTuber, that I would say, yeah, there's a slight bias, but it's complicated because it's not as simple as saying that I'm biased for men or against men. Like, one of the things that I was faced with that gave me an opportunity to really explore this was when I would work with heterosexual couples, and inevitably they would come in with conflict, and I would be faced with two people trying to win me over to their side. And there's a lot that I can talk to you about, what the approach is in therapy in a situation like that. It's not my job to say who's right and who's wrong, but it's also not my job to just be completely distant and just say, well, everyone has their point of view. There's a middle ground or a third thing that you're in, and it's complicated. And it's actually important for a couple therapists to one, evaluate their bias, even with same-sex couples, regarding different differences between individuals, gender being one, but there's a lot of other identities and just personal quirks that distinguish people from others, And so when I would talk with heterosexual couples, a very frequent question in one's mind is, am I giving the guy the benefit of the doubt and not the woman, or the opposite, or something else? And I'll tell you that when it comes to heterosexual men that I relate to, if anything, I'm harder on them because I can relate to them and I feel like I can bro down with them a little bit. So it's a pro and a con. So with the guys, I might be a little biased against, and I've thought about this a lot and I've noticed this about me, I might hammer on them a little harder. That's a weird way of putting it, but I hope you know what I mean, with love. And also, I would be more related. Our relationship might be facilitatedly faster as a bond because of me feeling more comfortable or knowing a certain type of heterosexual guy better or something. Or it's just familiarity of just, I have a lot of friends who are in a certain category, and so for the woman, I might be more likely to give her the benefit of the doubt, defend her, but also have a harder time broing down with her and quickly establishing a bond with her, because either I'm mistaken in considering us to have greater difference and more work to do to see eye to eye. So either I'm mistaken about that or that actually exists, and it does. So to say that I'm biased for or against is a simplification. So when I'm watching this show, it's the same thing. There are a lot of different associations that are kicking in. Gender, class, race, communication style, the edit, the way they hold themselves, the values that they have. You know, Leo and his stupid Rolex watches, that's triggering to me apparently on some level. And so it's very possible I was biased against him even further because of that, you know? So it's a lot of ebbs and flows regarding how biased or how for or against. But I would hope that people would, one, if I am ever showing that tendency, that, you know, you're free to tell me, but tell me in a way that's constructive. When I saw that, then that was a conversation that I wasn't really supposed to be. I mean, it wasn't private, but they weren't gearing it towards me, particularly because they probably didn't think I would see it. But feel free to tell me and just throw it out there in a tentative way is the thing. The other thing is that anyone that would claim that I am biased, in all likelihood, that individual is biased too about a whole suite of things. I can't know that, and that sounds self-serving, but that's my experience. For example, if someone says I'm biased against men, then in all likelihood, they identify with men that I'm reacting to, or a particular man. Because that's the other thing, like someone could be having a conversation about me online and they watched 5 minutes of one video. They didn't like what they saw, which is fine. And they just thought, I don't like his take, which I imagine most people wouldn't, because the conversations I see online are completely different than the kinds of things that I say. I just have to say that. I mean, maybe not so different from the comment section of my videos, but the conversations that I see online about Love is Blind and other reality TV shows that I watch, I find just so different than what I'm seeing, you know? And it's just so interesting. And that's the glory of human difference and our perceptions. What a wonderful thing. But I say all this because I would assume that anyone just watching one of my videos, at the very least at first, would be like, well, that's not how I saw it. Even on tiny little things, you know? So I would imagine that most people would see a difference, but to conclude, oh, he, you know, like if someone watched, you know, if there was a guy that in the audience that was watching Dave and say they like Dave, they see me saying something of a speculatively negative thing about Dave, and they have, as an audience member, both watching Dave and watching me, they have that difference to conclude, oh, he's biased against men. It's like, well, there's a lot of other possibility, maybe, but you know, maybe you're biased for men. Maybe you just caught 5 minutes of me saying something in I guess the negative camp, but overall I was saying things that are positive. You know, who knows? I just can't know. So I think that whenever I hear those kinds of observations of me, I imagine, and I don't know, that it's just this really simple way to discount someone. It's a really simple way to diminish and demean someone's point of view. You know, just imagine that you are talking about, or more pointedly, you are in your relationship trying to make a point about something, and people will do this. They'll say, oh, typical man or typical woman that you would say that. And it's so hurtful. It's so hurtful. It's just like this complete dismissal of everything you're saying, as if you are just spouting like a bias or a sexist. You're just a sexist ball of notions, and everything coming out of you is from that place. And so I've determined that about you, and all your thoughts and all your hopes and dreams are just completely negated because I have labeled you as such, you know. And we see that happen all the time, and it's fucking aggravating. I'll just say it. Anyway, well, I think this is the end of this scene, because when they play this music kind of cue, it's usually like gearing up for a cliffhanger. Oh, it's actually the end of the episode. So I'll watch a little bit of the next episode because sometimes they're actually playing a continuation of the conversation. And I'll have to heavily edit this. It's really annoying me that in this season they're playing like legit songs. Like they played Miley Cyrus, and I couldn't play even a second of that scene, which I predicted, which is annoying. Because when they play the other music, it's not copyrighted necessarily because it's not a hit song. Okay, so they're going on to another couple. So anyway, all right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone, please take care of yourself. We're all in this together. And I suspect my little rant there provoked some of you to feel bad for me and defend me and be nice to me, which I appreciate. If that happened, I appreciate it. If it didn't, I don't necessarily need it. I have my support people. And I'm not going to say that I don't appreciate it because I do. I don't need people to attack I don't want anyone to attack anyone. But we're in this together. I will model positive masculinity by saying I'm strong enough as a man to say that I have needs and I have insecurities. And when people reassure me, it is the wind beneath my wings. It really is. There are some emails and comments that I've actually saved to a file to pick me up when I am down, which can happen. And I guess I should be truthful and say when I read that, it was amusing, that conversation that was happening. And it just seemed so without any sort of data given and seemed so simplistic that I didn't internalize it. But it did get to me a little bit, as evidenced by, I think, by talking about it for so long and also by at least some of the emotionality around it. So, I have that. And I've been through this enough times to know that I'll recover one way or the other, either just over time or my own self-talk or talking to Stacy or hearing from you. And there are people that will say, yeah, I don't agree with everything you say. And there are some times when I really disagree. And yeah, there are some times when it kind of looks like you have some bias for sure. But I don't hold that against you. You're normal. You're human. I'm the same way. And I enjoy what you're saying overall. So, I'm not looking for like a complete refutation of that statement that I seem to be holding on to a little bit. That's what I'm saying about that. But don't feel like you have to comment at all. Because that is probably going to happen to some extent anyway, and that'll probably be enough for me. So for those that did, that'll be great. Thank you. And for those that didn't, that's also cool. I feel the love. I have enough experience with you over all the seasons of Love is Blind and other shows that I watched to feel really safe. The only reason why I've even talked about any of this stuff is because of the safety that I have, that you have created for me and I have absorbed, and I'm in a really good place. I went through a lot of ups and downs over the years on YouTube, and went through a particularly bad time a few years ago now during the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial 3 years ago. And although there was a lot of support, there was just an increase of a lot of chatter. And so therefore the 1% that would come after me, that group grew, right? It's still 1% of the overall conversation. But when it starts to become hundreds of people, it starts to really get to you. And since that time, I and my wife and the audience, we've all worked together to create a place where we can have these conversations and not feel like we're not safe, and not feel like if we express ourselves that we're going to be pigeonholed or stigma, or that people are going to give people the benefit of the doubt and they're not going to jump down people's throat. I hope that you feel that safety. I think it's very important if we're going to move forward as a society, and I'm not the first person to say this by any means, for us to do so, we have to feel safe enough to talk, even when we're wrong. That's the only way that we're going to move forward. So if we're wrong and someone were to, in a safe way, tell us, you're a good person, I'm with you, and I just want to say what you said indicates a bias or a problem. You're a good person. Let me state that up front. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm just going to throw it out there and, give it some thought and hug and all that kind of stuff. Imagine if we lived in a world like that. It just sounds absurd. And look where we are. Anyway, so at least in our little corner, it's good, right? And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.